Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. In this chus of learning, we should have the base of Migdash, and it should be a panacea. Okay, so we're going to start today Nun Hayam at Beis, 55b, a little behind, and we're starting from Amar Shmuel. It's about 15 lines up from the bottom, 2/3 of the way down. It's the middle of the line. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Hara Zunashika. Mashladam Shemnechetz by Al Piv Yefsh Shliach Kabasar. So we're learning about what is the prohibited act in a union that was prohibited. What would be considered that the violation was performed? Even not, it doesn't have to be a Kohen. It could be a Kohen also. But let's say someone lives with his sister or mother, or and the same thing would apply if he wants to marry the Yavam. What is considered the Yevama? What would be considered that he had relations? How much of the relation? How much of the act of relations of the bia does he have to do? So Shmuel says ha'ara. The Mishnah said ha'ara. Ha'ara just means the initial stage, but how much of this act is considered the initial stage? So he says Zunashika. This is just touching the organs one to another. Mashal Adam Shemnechetz Be'al Piv. For example, if a person put his finger on his lips, there's going to be a little bit of the finger entering in between the lips if he's pushing on the lips, even though he didn't push all the way in. But it's going to be considered that it entered. It's going to press against the lips. That's already considered the act. Okay. Kiyasa Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabba Bar Chana came from Eretz Yisrael, so he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar Bia B'Shifcha Charufa Zuach Nasa Satara. We had one rule that was different than all the other. Well, actually, we had three of them. We said yesterday the three times that it mentioned Shechva Zera in relations. Shechva Zera means the giving of seed. Now, that would mean that that's the end of the relations, not the beginning of the relations. The beginning of. So, when it says by Shifcha Charufa, uses that term, the giving of seed, you know what that's talking about? It doesn't actually mean the giving of seed. It means potential for giving seed. But that means that the corona was entered into the woman, the upper part of the organ. Okay, what do I get from Rabbi Yochanan? Get from Rabbi Yochanan that if that's considered the end of the relations, then the beginning of the relations, the initial stage of the relations, was probably what Shmuel said, which is Nashika, which is just the touching of the organs together. So Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel would be saying the same opinion. And this is all Rabbi Yochanan's rule based on what Rabba Bar Chana brings for us. You see, we have a bunch of travelers that would go from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and they would bring halachas. So one of them is Rabba Bar Chana. Well, Rabba Bar Chana came once. I don't know if he went back and forth. We have Ula, we have Rav Dimi, we have Ravin. Usually Ravin was the most authoritative. That was in the Gemara. And Rav Dimi a lot of time gets rejected. Say, oh, his rule, we didn't understand it. Then Ravin comes and he resolves everything. So here, Rabba Bar Chana brought us something from Rabbi Yochanan, and it fits with Shmuel. Okay, Masav Rav Sheshus. Sheshus says, Shichva Zerei Nechayev Elal Bia Samiruk. When it says in the pasuk Shichva Zera, which means giving of seed, which says by a Shifcha Charufa, which we learned yesterday, was a non-Jewish maidservant. That actually was yesterday's Chumash. That was partially married and was married to the Eved Ivri, possibly, and someone else comes along and lives with her. Okay, so it says over there that would be a violation if it was the complete act of relations. And the Brisa says that Rav Sheshus is quoting that it's only if the act is finished. My love, Miruk Gid. Miruk means finished or polished, the complete act. Miruk Gid means that the entire organ entered into the woman. what are you telling me that it's just the atara, the corona? No, it's the whole, it's the whole organ that entered. When it says lie, you don't have to say that. Mirak atara just means that the corona entered in. Okay, Kiyasar Rav Dimi Am Rabbi Yechanan, ha'ara zu hachnasas atara. Rav Dimi comes from Eretz Yisrael after Rabbi Bar Bachana. I remember Rabbi Bar Bachana brought in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that Gemar Bia was hachnasas atara. The conclusion. Rav Dimi comes and says the beginning is the hachnasas atara. This doesn't seem to fit with Shmuel. Shmuel says the beginning was neshika, was just the touching of the organs. Amrulei, so they said to Rav Dimi, but Rabbi Bar Bachana layamar hachi. Rabbi Bar Bachana didn't say what you're saying. It's a question on him. Amrlahu, he says, Iyu shakraya na shakri. He's a liar or I'm a liar. Which means basically, take it or leave it. This is, I'm not changing what I heard. This is what Rabbi Yechanan said. Okay. Kiyasa Ravin came, another traveler, a student of Rabbi Yechanan. He brings halachas. Am Rabbi Yechanan ha'ara zu hachnasas atara. Well, it says that the initial stage of relations is not the organs touching, it's the corona entering the woman. The Gemara says, Adarabba bar Barchana vaday palig. He's definitely arguing on Rabbi Bar Bachana because he's saying one thing in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Bar Bachana said something else in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. But Ad Shmuel milema palig. But is he arguing on Shmuel? No, Shmuel did not talk about. Shmuel's statement was that neshika, that the touching of the organs is the initial stage. So how is this going to work out? He says that hachnasas atara is the initial stage. So the Gemara says, "Loi." He's not necessarily arguing. How does this work? Minashika va'ad hachnasas atara ha'ara karilei. There's actually a range that in between what is considered ha'ara, which is the initial stage of relations, that goes from the touching of the organs until the corona enters into the woman. That's the all ha'ara. And then after that would be the Gemar. Okay. Kiyasa Rab Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yechanan. That's not as common as the other ones. He says ha'ara zu hachnasas atara. Ha'ara is the hachnasas atara, which is basically what Rav Dimi said and Ravin said. And Gemar Bia, what is the conclusion of the relations? Is Gemar Bia Mamish. Is the actual conclusion. Yeah. It doesn't, everyone else is elaborating on what's the conclusion. What does the conclusion mean? Does it mean the giving of the seed? Is that what he means? It doesn't tell us. Or does he mean, like we said before, that the whole organ is goes in? Mikan ve'elech, and Mikan ve'elech is actually an opposite of what you would think it would be. Mikan ve'elech means anything prior to the hachnasas atara. Anything less than that. Eina yala neshika. That's just considered neshika upater ala. And he's exempt. Neshika means that the kissing, but over here it means the touching of the organs. And then he would be exempt. Upalagad Shmuel, and he argues on Shmuel. Yeah. Yeah, these things could be hard to prove. They could be claiming this and that. Everyone's claiming something else. Depends how much money's involved. Inheritances and different things. So no, I was the wife. I get the inheritance. Okay. Next piece of the Mishnah we quote. Said in the Mishnah that in order for the Yavam to acquire the Yevama, so that would happen with relations, and it didn't matter what the intent was in the relations. Even if he was mistaken for the wrong woman, he thought it was his wife, it was really the Yevama, or even if it was Ba'inus, he forced her, all these things. And then it says that whether he had the initial stage of the relation or he concluded the relation, all of those, he still acquires the Yevama. They become husband and wife. Again, it's the brother of the deceased marrying the widow. My kana, what does it mean he acquires her for a wife? Now, there's several halachas that this could be relevant for. One of them is for the inheritance, where he now takes over the brother's estate, the deceased brother's estate. Also, let's say he has children, this brother, like Reuven passed away and now without children, and Shimon, the brother that has children, steps in to take over that marriage to Leah, the widow. Now, if he would immediately pass away, Shimon, then there's no mitzvah of Yibam on Leah, because Shimon already had children, and Shimon took over the marriage of Reuven. So even though he never established the name for Reuven, but now that he's passed away, he's not taking care of that, there's no mitzvah of Yibam anymore. So was Leah acquired by Shimon? This halachas in the laws of Yibam. Then there's one other halacha that's not relevant to Yibam. It's relevant to just the husband and wife. Let's say he's a Kohen. Can Leah eat truma? Well, the only difficulty over here is that what about Reuven? If Shimon's a Kohen and they're brothers from the father, so Reuven was also a Kohen. So if she's eating truma because of Shimon, she's eating truma because of Reuven. The answer is that let's say Reuven was never really married to her, he was only betrothed to her. When does she begin to eat truma? From the marriage, when the marriage is consummated, not from the betrothal. But when do the laws of Yibam apply? Even from the betrothal. So she was never eating truma from Reuven. And now she's going to be married to Shimon through a relations that was just an irregular or some sort of not a complete relations, but nevertheless we say that works. So do we say that that's a full marriage already? And now she can eat truma. That's going to be a machlekes here. So my kana, what does it mean that this relations is enough to acquire her as a wife? Rav Amar kana lakal. Rav says totally the wife for everything, even truma for all halachas. In Shmuel Amar kana l'dvarim ha'amurim beparsha. Shmuel says that it only works for the things that are under the category of Yibam, which means liyarish b'nechseyachiv, that he inherits the estate of the deceased brother, and to exempt her from Yibam if he then Shimon passes away, because Shimon already had children, so she doesn't need to do Yibam. And min hanesuin means like this, that if Reuven was married to Leah, and then Reuven passed away, and now Shimon comes in and does a sort of relations that's not the full relations, but we say that it acquires anyway. So divrei hakol achla. Everyone would agree that she's going to eat truma as well, because she originally ate under Reuven as well. So there's not, of course she's going to have truma. I thought when he passes away, she continues to eat truma anyway. No, only unless, no. If she had a child, then she would continue to eat truma because of the child that's eating truma. But if she doesn't have a child, then she goes back to her father's house, and over there the father was a Yisrael. She doesn't eat truma. In this case, that's the interesting thing here. She's going to resume eating truma because of the Yavam's relations with her. Okay. Keep ligi. Where's the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel, Mina Eris, and if she didn't eat truma before? But now Why not? Why was she not eating truma before? Because she was only betrothed to Ruvain. And now Ruvain passed away. And now she has relations with Shimon, but it wasn't a complete relations. It was just ha'ara, or it was maybe some other way. It was ba'ines. It wasn't in the regular way. And we're saying that it's going to come back. She's going to be able to eat truma according to Rav. Rav Amrei Cheles.
Is this based on her testimony of what the relations were, or his testimony of what the relations were?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I don't know the answer. I don't know what would happen.
He may say that it was Nashika, and she may say that it was Ara.
Right.
And it may be like splitting there, and
right.
Who knows?
Right. So, I all I can say is that what the Gemara is trying to establish what the rule will be. Who's going to be believed over here? I'm not sure. I don't know how that's going to go about. But first, they want to establish, well, what is? Let's say they both agree. so let's establish what the demarcations are of what's going to be what.
Let's keep it simple. They agree.
Let's keep it simple. Then we'll have to work on Eidech and Naman Bisurim. We'll have to work on monetary laws if they need testament. I mean, there's going to be a lot of complications in this of what testimony is, who's going to be believed. Yeah, I bet there's a rule somewhere of who's believed. There's got to be.
Question is always it's a different question.
Right, it's a different question than the law. Yeah, here we're discussing the law, but then we're going to have to figure out is when there's an argument between what the relations were, how much of the act was completed, and there's a disagreement between the husband and the wife, who would be believed? That's a different question. It's got to be in one of the small letters in one of these pages.
Well, in most cases like this, the party who brings the action has the burden of proof. Whoever side it's on isn't going to be able to sustain the burden.
Right. Right.
So someone who can't have relations, I guess, not married. I think I read that. Is that in the Torah?
No, that would only be. We're going to actually learn about that. Where is that tomorrow? I think we're going to learn about that tomorrow.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's a special case if someone was castrated or something, but not necessarily.
But in this case, it's not some.
This was just they just had the initial act of relations.
Right.
They didn't have the full act, whatever the scenario was. So Rav, his opinion is that she becomes acquired for all purposes, for all halachas. The Rabbi Rahman Abiyashagi Kamezit. It's very clear that if the relations were even shogeg, that in other words, the intentions weren't correct. He thought he was living with his wife. He ended up living with his sister-in-law, and nevertheless, she becomes acquired as a Yevama. So that's it. She's acquired, so she can eat truma. Shmuel Amar Ki Rabbi Rahmana. When does the Torah say that you don't need the right intentions? L'ukmei b'makam ba'al. That's only to establish him as the new husband in the place of the old husband that was deceased. But you have to go back to look at Ruvain's status, and Ruvain also never had her eating truma because there was only a betrothal. Yeah, can't get any higher, can't get any stronger than the initial marriage. Initial marriage was only a betrothal. If it was a real act of relations, then of course they'd be married. But over here, it wasn't the full act of relations. That's the question. When we're saying that we have this, that any sort of relation is considered the act, the yibum, it doesn't necessarily mean the full yibum. It just means that it brings back the however strong the marriage of the first husband was, according to Shmuel.
It's also for inheritance too, no?
Yeah, well, for inheritance, it would for sure work. The question is if it also works for truma, for all those. What's the Shmuel Tamei? And Shmuel follows his logic. The Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman says the name of Shmuel. This is what I always thought, that Rav Nachman is a Talmud of Shmuel. We had Gemaras before that Rav Nachman is a Talmud of Rav. So anyway, this is confirms what I I always thought. I don't know why I always associated Rav Nachman with Shmuel. Okay, Nachman says the name of Shmuel. Kol she'abal Michael. If the husband will cause that the wife can now eat truma because he's a Kohen and now he's married her. So now she'll eat in his house. He eats truma, she eats truma. So Yavam Michael, the Yavam will also have his wife eat truma. They're brothers, by the way. So the only thing is that she goes back to her father's house in the middle. Let's say the husband would not have her eat truma. Why not? Maybe it's only Erison. So Yavam Eina Michael. The Yavam also won't have her eat truma. What does it mean? The Yavam won't have. How is he the Yavam and he's not causing to eat truma? The answer is because the relations was not a complete relations. Okay. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question from a Brisa. Bas Yisrael Pikachas. The sane, what is it? What is the word? Sane?
Mentally competent.
Mentally competent. Pikachas. Mentally competent. So a girl that's sane.
Wow, that's so weird.
Shenis Arsa L'Kohen Pikach. That becomes betrothed to a Kohen that's sane. We're spelling that out because things are going to switch. No. He doesn't get a chance to consummate the marriage until Shenischarish. Until he, does that mean he went? Yeah. Until he went insane. He lost his mental capacity.
It says here deaf mute.
Right, deaf.
Deaf mute. Okay. Which that's what we call.
Speak and he couldn't hear.
Yeah. Okay, so the rule by a deaf mute is that the kedushin is only midrabanan and all of this. Anyway, he was already betrothed. He's already betrothed.
Because he's deaf, he loses that right.
Not just deaf mute. He loses his. Yeah, that's what it's understood. Can't communicate at all.
Is it definitely considered not sane?
Yeah. Yeah, it goes under the same category.
Right.
Right.
He's thinking, but he can't express himself.
Right.
He can't deny it or.
There's no communication. Can't hear and he can't speak. Braille. Right. That's our term.
Nowadays, there was more hope. Then there was nothing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. If it would apply nowadays with communication, with they can talk with even with the eye. They can get the computer to talk to you.
Oh.
Yeah, what was that guy, that scientist that had a computer? So, what happened over here? She can't eat truma because there's no real marriage. Because he lost his mental capacity. What happens, mace? See, if you read the Brisa just as what it says, she was only betrothed to the husband, to Ruvain. She can't eat truma. Why? Because he lost his mental capacity. Now, Ruvain passed away. Shimon comes along, and Shimon, by the way, also doesn't have the mental capacity. He marries her. Look at what happens. She can now eat truma.
Whoa.
The Yavam is stronger than the husband. The husband wasn't able to get her to eat truma. But this is even more of a marriage. And now she can eat truma.
I think I remember we went to Mishnah, so Gemara, that in a regular situation, when someone's engaged, you're allowed to eat. She's engaged to a client. She's allowed to eat only when she goes to his house.
There was a concern. There was a gzeira.
Right, because she would be allowed to eat her own house, but maybe she'll give her brother, her father, her family.
Right.
So in this case,
Very good.
Where they're engaged, and then he begets nephew, why would she be allowed to eat? I'm just wondering why she wouldn't be allowed to eat through.
Yeah, because of that gezerah, that's what we mean. Because of that gezerah, that she's always going to be considered just in the status of betrothed. Doesn't go further. Because of that gezerah, there's a gezerah that if she's not fully married, she may end up feeding the food to her brother or father, which are not kayanim.
But with rice, she would be not.
Yeah, midiraisa it should work. Okay, yeah. Bishleim Rav. When we look at this price, according to Rav Nicha, everything works out well. Why? Because according to Rav, this sort of relations that he has, even though it's not a complete relations, but nevertheless, it makes her as his wife to the extent that she's even allowed to eat truma. El Shmuel kasha, but according to Shmuel, we never have the yavam any stronger than the original husband. Here we're talking about even if the relation, in the Bryce, it's referring to that the relations was not a complete relations, or it was including that case. Okay.
The second case where she gets married to the brother-in-law, how does that change the rabban of the chash about?
Yeah, that's the question. That's the question.
Unless she's actually living with him in his house.
She's moving into his house. She's married to him. But we're talking about even if the initial act of the relations was just ta'ara, that's all it was. But nevertheless, she becomes the yevama, and we're saying that now she can eat. Now she can eat truma. That's the kasha Shmuel. Amalach Shmuel will answer like this. What we're going to need to do to this price is we're going to have to amend it. Eimahachi. Shmuel would say to you, say it like this. She wasn't able to complete the marriage until he lost his mental capacity. Now we add in a phrase. Kanas. But let's say he did marry her. And then he lost his mental capacity. Then she can eat. Well, that is rather obvious. Why do you have to add that in? The reason why we have to add that in is because now we're going to follow up with the yibam. Mace, if now he passes away, and then she falls to the yavam, that's a cheresh. Now she can eat. Why? Because she was originally married. When in her original marriage, she was able to eat. So now she can eat also. She can continue eating. Yeah. Resume her eating. Oh, my bazu. The Gemara has an interesting question. So why did you tell me that this is stronger? The yavam is stronger than the husband. If the husband was able to, it's not stronger. It's the same. Dilubal. Oh, the Gemara answers. Dilubal cheresh miikara lo yechelas. Vilayavam cheresh miikara achla. Why is this stronger? Because if the husband, the truth is right now it is the same. It's just the theoretically stronger. Why? Because if the husband would have lost his mental capacity before he consummated the marriage, then she would not be allowed to eat truma. But the yavam that has lost his mental capacity before the marriage, she does eat truma. Why is that? Yeah. And the reason is because she was already married to the first one properly, and now she was already in the family, and now the yavam just resumes that marriage. So that he's able to do.
Yavam is based
on the first marriage, right? Okay. Now Ikad Amri, we have Machlekes Rav and Shmuel that was getting us into this whole discussion with the questions and all of that. Some learn the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel slightly different. They learn like this. Mina Eris, we learned that the whole Machlekes was over here. Mina Erisin, that the original marriage was not a complete marriage. It was only betrothal. If the original marriage was Mina Nesuin, was Reuven was married, fully married, then even a relations that was incomplete would still, for the Yavam, would still bring her back. But now we're learning different. Mina Erisin, Divrei Hakol Lo Yachla. Even Rav would say that the Yibam would not bring in a new status that she can now eat. She didn't even eat by the husband. Now with this quasi relation she's going to eat, keep pligi min anesuin. That's if she originally ate by the husband. That's where the machlek says, Rav Amar Eicheles Tahavi Yachla Mikara, because she ate originally. So now she comes back to that. Shmuel Amar Eina Eicheles. Shmuel says no. Ki Rabbi Rachman Abi Yashegi Kmezel Devar Mumam Parsha. Aval Kol Mililai. When does the Torah tell me that she's considered the wife? That's for everything that's regarding Yibam. But now you're mixing in the laws of Kayanim. That the Torah doesn't say that it applies to that. But we have a statement in the name of Shmuel that if the husband could have her eat, then the Yavam would also have her eat. And since the husband had her eat, so the Yavam would also have her. What does this mean? If it was an absolute marriage, then the husband would have her eat, so then the Yavam would also have her eat. But if it wasn't an absolute marriage for the husband, it wasn't a complete bia. So it won't be a complete bia for the Yavam either, and you won't eat. Okay. Gemara says, Meisvei, 1 second. We're going to ask this a question that we asked before. Let's say there's the same Jewish girl that's married to Yisraelis girl. She's not a Kohen. She's not a Bas Kohen. That's betrothed to a Kohen that's also sane. And he's not able to consummate the marriage until he goes insane. She can't eat. Let's say he passed away. And now the brother that's also deaf mute, doesn't have all the capacities, is now taking over the marriage. So she's allowed to eat. And over here the Yavam is stronger than the Baal. If we're going to say according to Rav said that if there was an Asuin, then she can now eat, even with this sort of marriage. We'll answer this brisa to explain it the way Shmuel explained it, that we have to add in one clause. Say it's talking about that the marriage was consummated properly, and then he passed away, and then the Yavam comes along and does whatever he does, and then we say that she can now eat. So Rav can fix the brisa. Shmuel kasha. But according to Shmuel, that says she can eat. It's impossible. Shmuel says she never eats. It's impossible. Shmuel said, even if the original marriage was Nesuin, was a complete marriage, but this wasn't a full marriage now. So kasha. Mar says that's a good question. Yeah. We're equating a cheresh, a deaf mute having relations, to a relations of a shaygig, of not knowing which that's our equation. That's why we're putting this together. If the deaf mute Yavam can't do it, then the shaygig also shouldn't be able to do it. And according to Shmuel, the deaf what comes out from the brisa is that the deaf mute can have a full marriage, and the shaygig cannot. Okay. We had a Gemara that he tears his clothing, he sleeps in the cemetery. So we had a Gemara like that. There may be other qualifications also. It has to do with if you can be sent to the store and bring back the change. Yeah, there's other qualifications. Right. Yeah, it becomes problematic when someone is just crazy about one thing. He's not fully crazy, he's just crazy in one area.
That's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
that's why I'm challenging the idea that also shows. It's different categories. The way you escape the category is different.
Yeah, there was a famous tshuva from Reb Moshe about this guy that was running around the Midwest or something, claiming he was Mashiach. I don't remember if he wore clothing or not. And the question was if he could give his wife a get. It was, I don't remember the details of that, but it wasn't 100%. That's what I say.
Rabbi Jacobson recently gave a class on that.
Oh yeah.
It was in Germany. Maybe it was a different case also, where that happened also.
Yeah. Okay. So Taner Rabbanan, we're going to go back to this brisa, but the only thing is it's going to have a different ending. The following brisa, Taner Rabbanan, Bas Yisrael Pikacha Shenesar Selakayim Pikeach. She is saying, and the kohen that she's marrying is saying, however, before he can consummate the marriage, he goes insane, or he loses his mental capacities. He now becomes a deaf mute. So she can't eat truma. The marriage is never really completed over there because it's not a sane person. He can't complete the marriage. Noilad labain. Let's say she had a son. Now, once she has a son, the son is a kohen because the father was a kohen. So, she can eat because she can feed to the son. She can also eat. Meis haben. Let's say the son passed away. Well, now we have a machlekes. Reb Nosson amar eichelas v'chachamim ein eichelas. Reb Nosson says she can eat, and the chacham say no. My time of the Reb Nosson. Why does Reb Nosson allow her to eat? Amar Rabba, because she ate at one point, so she continues to eat. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says to his teacher, to Rabba, Elamayata, if that's your logic, let's say if he dies, the husband dies, so she should continue eating because she once ate. If that's the logic that once eating is enough, Amalei, given the mislay, the holiness went off once he passed away. She's not considered an Eishes Kayan anymore. It's well Hachanami, given the mislay, mina. Since the child died, so the holiness went off. So if it stops, then it stops, and if it doesn't stop, then it doesn't stop. Elam Rab Yosef explains differently. Kasava Rab Nosson, Nesue Cheresh Machilim B'Truma. A marriage of a Cheresh, a full marriage, has her eat Truma. V'legos Rin Nesue Cheresh at the Kedusha Cheresh. And we don't make this decree.
It's the same halacha if someone's normal and they have a child married to a kohen.
Right.
As long as the child's living, she's allowed to eat truma. That's son, then she's
allowed. Yeah. What would the issue be? The issue would be is that the Nesue Cheresh only really has the status of a kedushin. It's not really a full marriage. So maybe we would say that it should just be like a kedushin where she doesn't eat. But what was the issue by a kedushin is that she may feed it to her brothers. Reb Nosson says that even though the nesuin is like a kedushin, but we don't have that problem that maybe she's going to feed the truma to her brothers.
why?
Because it's a full marriage. It's not halachically a full marriage, but she's not at home. She's not at her. And Amalei Abaya, so Abaya says, Yihachi noilad laben lamali. Why does she have to have a child, according to Reb Nosson? One second, I thought he passed away. If he passes away, then he needs to have a child. Oh, even if he didn't pass away, she needs a child. Yeah. We said in the Brisa that if the entire Nisuin was all after he went insane, so then she only eats if there's a child. But according to Reb Nassan, why does she have to have a child to eat? The machlokes Reb Nassan was if the child passed away, right? Reb Nassan and the Chachamim. But according to Reb Nassan, even if she didn't have a child, she should be eating. So the Gemara answers Mishum Rabbanan. What we wanted to say was that if she has a child, then the Rabbanan would be maida that she eats. It wasn't for Reb Nassan. For Reb Nassan, she eats anyway. We're trying to say that in that case, the Rabbanan would agree that she eats. So the Gemara says, "V'liflig Reb Nassan alaya bereisha." So why don't we have the machlokes in the beginning that she eats even before the child? Why didn't you tell me Reb Nassan's view? He wanted to let the rabbis finish their opinion, and then he was going to argue. So Zihachi, that's the case. Listening Beis Ben Einar Echeles, Reb Nassan Einar Echeles. If it's the Rabbanan's view, then why do you start off saying Reb Nassan's view and then say the Rabbanan's view? If you're continuing the opinion of the Rabbanan, so continue without putting any name in there, and then Reb Nassan will conclude and say, I disagree. But obviously, it's not the Rabbanan's view, what's going on before. Gemara says Kasha. That's a question. It's a question on Reb Yosef's Pshat. This is Rabbi asking these questions. Okay, now the Gemara says, B'chein haba lachas mikol harayos. The same thing applies, the same sort of relations. What is exactly the criteria of the relations that he has with the Yavam? The same thing applies to any forbidden relations. Is going to be the same criteria. Amar Rav Amram says, Hamel Samarlan Amar Lan Rav Sheshes. Rav Amram says that this matter of Sheshes told us van harinu le'einen mimasnisin. And he lightened up our eyes from our Mishnah, as he proved it to us. So goes on. Eishes Yisrael Shenensa. Was that really our Mishnah? We have that in our Mishnah. It means from a Mishnah. From a Mishnah. If there's a wife of a Yisrael that was raped, so she's allowed to go back to her husband. That's not considered adultery. Well, from his part it is, but it's not. She's not considered an adulteress, so she can go back to her husband. However, let's say the husband passes away. Psula lakuna. She cannot marry a Kohen, even though she's a widow, and a widow is allowed to a Kohen. But because she was raped, now a raped woman, while she's married, is forbidden to a Kohen. But in the state that she was in, she was permissible to her husband. But now her husband passed away. So now she can't marry the Kohen.
That's coming back.
Yeah, it was never really there, right? But yeah. An Israelite can. Yeah. B'tanatuna. We also have a brisa. It says like this. B'tanatuna means in it's our Mishnah as well. Yeah, it's probably B'tanatuna means it's our Mishnah. And the Tana taught it in our Mishnah. Isn't that interesting? Our Mishnah says, and also someone that lived with any of the forbidden unions, forbidden relations that are mentioned in the Torah, or anyone that would be puzzled to a Kohen. And the Mishnah concludes, after that relations, she's forbidden to marry a Kohen. My v'chein, what are you saying v'chein? So what did we say before? We were talking before about all different types of relations, b'shaygig or b'mezid or ba'inus or b'ratzon or ha'ara and all of this. Included in that was ba'inus, if she was raped. And now she goes and now she's going to be prohibited to a Kohen. My love, leishna shaygig, leishna mezid, leishna ba'inus, leishna b'ratzon, katani pasla. See, even though at the time when this happened, she was married to an Israelite and she's permitted to her husband, but she's still prohibited to a Kohen. If her husband would pass away and she would want to marry a Kohen, as a widow can, but she can't. Umar says, "Loi, it's not a proof." My v'chein, You know when it says and also, what's the continuation? Not talking about rape. What it means is ahara. It's coming to tell me that what is considered relations, the criteria that we gave before. But the criteria was that even the initial stage of relations is considered relations. Not that rape would make her puzzle to a Kohen. Not that aspect. It says, and so to what? What did you say before? So there's so many details before. So we're choosing one that would not include that the rape would make her prohibited to a Kohen. Okay. Kumar says, hara deman. Which hara is the initial one where you're going to say, and so to the next one. Ilay madarayas, if you're going to tell me that ha'ara, the initial stage, is prohibited by the forbidden unions, when you use the term so too, that means that the first one was the main one, and now you're including something else. So you're telling me the first one was yibam, where ha'ara, the initial stage, is the main act of, and so too by the arayas. The Gemara says, really? Adarabba, yavama yalfin me arayas. The ikar ha'ara ba'arayas ksiv. The psukim that we learned that ha'ara is the act of the relations, that the initial stage is the main part. We learned that from arayas. You can't say so to arayas. That was where we got it from. You know what it says v'chein? One of the things that we mentioned was that if the relations was not done in the normal manner, it was done in the abnormal manner, in the other way, in the not normal way, so that would also be the prohibition. The Gemara says, Adarabba, you're going to tell me that that's what you learned from Yibam? Where did you get that halacha by Yibam? You got it from Arayas. So you can't use the term so too by the forbidden unions. Rather, you know where it says what it means so too? Yeah, what we're doing over here now is we're saying that there's a term mishkavei isha. The layings, it's a plural with a woman. Where's that term used? By chayve krisis, by the forbidden unions. And because it's a plural, we learn that whether the relations were done in a normal manner or in a non-normal manner, so then we say that both of those are considered the forbidden relations. It does not say that by chayve lavin. And it doesn't say it by Yibam either, but I learned from the forbidden unions to Yibam. So, and then it says v'chein, and so too to the forbidden relations. Now, 1 second. I learned from the forbidden to Yibam. So we're saying no. What we mean v'chein is so too to the chayve lavin, to the prohibition, to the negative prohibitions, where over there it doesn't say mishkavei isha either. And that's where I'll learn that whether it's the normal manner or not normal manner will always be the same prohibition. Amar Rava. It's really Rabba. We'll see later. It's going to be Rabba. Eishes kain shenensa. If there's a wife of a Kohen that was raped, and then the husband refuses to divorce her, he lives with her again. Like Alam Mishum Zaina. He gets Malkus because he lived with a woman that's called a Zaina, lashes. Now, Zaina is not translated the way we translate Zaina today. Today, Zaina just means a prostitute. In the Torah, that's not what it means. In the Torah, it means a woman that had lived with someone that was prohibited. Doesn't mean she's a prostitute. Zaina today is much worse than it was then. Zaina is a small category of women that had relations with someone that was prohibited to them. For example, this woman was raped. She's not the English translation doesn't fit. The Hebrew is Zaina. So the husband wasn't allowed to live with her because he's a Kohen. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Mishum Zaina in Mishum Tumalai. Why are you telling me it's only because it's a Kohen prohibition? This is a marriage prohibition. Why? Because if she has had relations with another man, even if it was rape, she's forbidden to her husband. Not because she's a Zaina, because she had relations with another man. This was considered an adulterous act for a Kohen. And so why? Tumalai, it's not because of impurity, which we mean that she can't live with her husband. Ema af mishum zaina. So we say it's both prohibitions. She can't live with her husband because she had relations with another man. And also she now goes under another status, which makes her prohibited to a Kohen.
So like older comes and rapes the woman, and the Cohen's wife.
Yeah.
You can't even have your wife back.
Right. Masav Reb Zera. Reb Zera has a question. If she wasn't grabbed, then she's forbidden to her husband. In other words, a woman that commits adultery and she wasn't forced, so then she's prohibited to her husband. Hanit basa, but let's say she was forced, mutaris, then she's permitted to her husband. However, by an Israelite. However, there is another case where even if she's grabbed, then she's prohibited. Bezu, which case is that? Eshes Kohen, if the husband is a Kohen. The Gemara says, you just told me that that the husband gets malchus if he lives with her for two reasons. One, because she's a Zaina, and you can't marry a Zaina, negative prohibition. And also because she committed adultery. Now it's not for a Kohen, that's considered committing adultery, and so he can't live with her. So also, it's not true. It's a positive prohibition. It's a positive command that from the positive we learn the negative. It implies a negative, and the rule is that's a positive. There's no malchus for that. Amarabba hakoli b'chlal zaina k'shapart lachakasav gabeishis Yisrael. We say it's like this. I'm not sure if we're changing the source of the Hilay Nitbasa. I think what we're doing is we're saying that the Loika Alam Mishum Zaina is the original source. I'm not sure how this works. Let me see how it says it in your commentary. Since the Torah does not limit the category of zona with regard to the wife of a priest, she is considered a zona even if she was raped. And what does that tell me? The commentaries are puzzled by this statement. What does it mean that initially the wife of Israel was raped and considered a zona? The Taisus Rosh explains that initially the wife of an Israelite was considered a zona, also prohibited to her husband due to becoming ritually impure. She is not prohibited to him if she was raped, but she was considered a zona and is prohibited to a priest. The wife of a priest is also classified as zona, and therefore, what it's doing is it's saying that the whole law of Tumah also was under the law of Zina. It was only that we removed it for an Israelite. Okay, let's finish to the Mishnah. Ikadamri, there are those that say Amar Rabba Ishes Kain Shenenza Baila Lekla Mishum Tumah. We have exactly the opposite statement. Not that the husband that lives with the Kayan, that lives with his wife after she was raped, that the problem is because she's a Zina. The problem is because it's adultery. It's considered like that that's Tumah. She lived with another man, so the husband can't live with her. Mishum Tumah and Mishum Zaina Lai. Why are you only saying Tumah? What about the Zaina? She also loses her status as being someone that's eligible to a Kohen. Alma Bainas like Korean Bay Zaina must be that we don't call her a Zaina if it was Bainas. If it was rape. But it's not true. Masav Reb Zera v'hilaynit basasur nit p'samuteres yischa cheres shaf b'shnit basur v'ezizu eishis kayin b'lavim b'mechlal asay. She becomes prohibited. Amar Rabba hakol hayu b'chlal achrei asher hutama. Everyone was included in the tumah. But it was only an exclusion of the Israelite's wife that if she was raped, that she's exempt. But if she was raped, she's exempt. That would mean that the Eishes Kayin has the original status of Tuma, even when she's raped. Even when she's raped. That's what we're saying over here. Okay, let's leave it there.
Yeah.